You're watching Newsnight's Deccan Vahini. I'm Pratibha, arguably the most prominent political leader from Karnataka, the 11th Prime Minister of India, and a man who has probably been a farmer's leader for 7 decades. Deve Gowda is an enigma in the field of politics. But despite his long career in politics and despite so many achievements to his credit, there are parts of his life that people still don't know much about. Now, journalist and political commentator Sugata Srinivasaraju has attempted to demystify Deve Gowda as we know him in the book Furrows in a Field, The Unexplored Life of HD Deve Gowda. Many thanks, Mr. Sugata, for joining us. Congratulations on your book. It has received rave reviews and rightly so as well. A lot of appreciation from Mr. Deve Gowda as well. And it has so many aspects of his life that people probably never really knew about, isn't it?
That's right. Thank you, Pratibha. Thank you for having me here. And you're right, this is an effort which tries to demystify Mr. Deve Gowda. He's been an enigma indeed. And the enigma part is not so much because Mr. Deve Gowda has been an enigma, because the media has sort of portrayed him in a certain fashion. And the media has, not not done enough of their homework to understand the man. So he has been portrayed in a certain way, and that has stuck to him. And he has not made any specific efforts to correct the perception or the prejudice against him. And this book is not a book which tries to sort of rehabilitate him or try to offer him some justice after 25 years that he stepped down as India's prime minister. This is a biography. This is a work, this is a professional work. This is not something that is done to please Mr. Deve Gowda. You said Mr. Deve Gowda is also happy. I'm really happy that he's happy. But, he has been very cautious in receiving this book because, I gave him a copy of the book, the first copy, and we had an agreement right at the beginning when I started working on this book that I shall not show anything that I'm writing on him. But if he chooses, he can give me interviews and I'll ask him questions. And he, being an old style politician, a Democrat, he agreed to that. And to be fair, he never asked what I was writing, what I was making of his life. But he was certainly curious as to how I was receiving all of it. But he did not interfere or intervene in the process. This is an absolutely professional work. And as you see at the end of my writing, you will see 100 pages of notes in this book, which is, it's meticulously researched. There's a lot of archival material in the book. There are a lot of interviews with people whom Mr. Deve Gowda worked with and have been familiar with. And there is also interviews with the man himself. He's given me a lot of time. And so this is a professional work. That is something that I would like to state right at the beginning. So it looks at Deve Gowda's life, career, and his times, because there is a context to the man's life. So there is a context to the politics in which sort of he grew. So I look at everything. So this is not just about Deve Gowda. There's also about the 7 decades of politics and the different players in those politics. Very, very important people. Like it could be Morarji Desai, it could be P.V. Narasimha Rao, it could be Vajpayee. Ramakrishna Hegde, that's one of the longest chapters in the book. His fight with Ramakrishna Hegde is an epic battle, so to say, with Ramakrishna Hegde. So these are all part of the book. And I would like to emphasize that this is a professional work. And as you have seen the endorsements on the book, the reviews on the book, they're all by professional historians in America, in France, in UK, and other places. So this is a professional work, is what I would like to emphasize, for the simple reason that Mr. Deve Gowda has attended the launches of the book. So people think that it is an authorized biography. It is not. There are a lot of critical elements in the book, which he has taken it in his stride.
Right. And, you said that he did not have a look at it until you had completed it fully, and that's saying something at a time. It comes as a breath, something very fresh, but at a time when political leaders are accused of, sort of media management. But if you look at Deve Gowda's story, it's the stuff of legends. He came from, a humble Vokaliga family. He went on to the highest political office in India, but still, you believe somewhere, and you're right in saying so, that people still don't know enough about him. Why do you think that is?
You're right. See, he did not see the book until it was fully printed and handed. A copy of it was given to him. So that is, he did not interfere. And you're right about that point. That today, I don't think too many political leaders will be very happy about people writing about them and they not knowing what is being written about them. They completely control the narrative. To Deve Gowda's credit, all through his career, I don't think he spent a single penny on either media management or image management. So that is something which is astonishingly true about the man. So the next question that you asked is, why is it that he has not been discovered enough? Why did I have to write an unexplored life of Deve Gowda after 7 decades of him in politics? That's something that I discovered on the way. What could be the reason? One is, of course, Mr. Deve Gowda was not from the elite Anglophone background. So Deve Gowda was a rank outsider to Delhi politics. So people in Delhi were completely surprised by this dhoti clad man, not very, very, polished in his mannerisms, someone who's not really bothered about the media, someone who's completely obsessed with work, eating ragi. And today you celebrate millets and you call it a balanced diet and this and that and everything. But 25 years ago, it was some kind of a tribal meal that people in Delhi thought that this man was eating. So he was a complete rank outsider to the atmosphere that existed in Delhi at that point of time. So that is one of the reasons. Anglophone elite thought this man was, somebody who was a lottery prime minister. So they were completely in the cocktail circuits of Delhi. If you read this book by Tavleen Singh called Darbar, you will get a fair idea as to the kind of gossip that takes place in high class Delhi society. So he was a butt of jokes there. But this man did not really bother about that. So that is about the Anglophone elite. It's not just the socialites who were ridiculing him. Even the English intellectuals who were, English only intellectuals, I should emphasize that, the Anglophone elite intellectuals also did not understand Mr. Deve Gowda. They went on propagating that here is a prime minister who can't speak English, who can't speak Hindi. See, Hindi, yes, he was not very familiar with Hindi, but he understood Hindi because he had dealt with national politics from the 70s on. So you should remember, he was one of the founding pillars of the Janata Party, which replaced Indira Gandhi, right? He was extremely close to Mr. Morarji Desai. He, in fact, thought he was his mentor. He was part of the Jayaprakash Narayan's movement. He was in jail in Bangalore Central Prison with Advani and Vajpayee and a host of other national leaders. So he had a basic understanding of Hindi. Of course, his Hindi is as good as my Hindi. I'm not very familiar. I don't feel very confident speaking Hindi, but I do get the drift of it. So that was Hindi. But English, this is something completely unfair because Mr. Deve Gowda, as you will read in the book, his father was unlettered, and his father somehow got this idea, Pratibha, that he should give his son English education. So when he is about to get into high school, this father of his, goes around scouting for an English tutor. And then he goes to one of these kirana shops where he is regularly buying, stuff for his home. Okay. And he asks that proprietor whose sons are educated, saying that, can you take my son and get him admitted in the English medium at the Hole Narsipur Municipal High School? And so that is how the journey begins. And this man is put into the English school, English medium school. And there he's very weak in history. He's very good in mathematics. He's getting 99, 100 out of 100 in mathematics, but he's extremely weak in English. Therefore, his history papers are very weak. He gets a very bad score in history. At that point, one of his teachers, very jokingly tells him, that if you want to be A.G. Deve Gowda, then you better pick up your English. I mean, or you do well. And I mean, Deve Gowda just, manages. But the fact is that he made history, and his English was not that bad. And in fact, in the book, I say that his felicity in English was far, far higher than that of a Vajpayee. And Mr. Chidambaram, who speaks a kind of English that the middle class really loves to hear, comments on his English, and he says he spoke perfect English. So Deve Gowda was not someone who did not know his English. He knew his English extremely well, and he could write. He had done all his legislative work. This will surprise you if you look at the archives. If you look at the letters that this man has been writing to all national leaders, Neelam Sanjeev Reddy, Morarji, Ramakrishna Hegde, Chandrasekhar, all Nijlingappa, all those letters which I quote from are in English, and he's writing impeccable English. In the sense, it's grammatically clean and neat, and it's not Queen's English, of course. I don't think any of us would expect him to speak the Queen's English. He's not Hemingway or somebody else, a literature like that. But then he's communicating his emotion and his thoughts, and his intellectual thread is in fact very, very cogent and logical in those letters. And this man is accused, or is the prejudice of the English intellectuals. They say that this man doesn't know English. So English is another factor, besides the socialite stuff that we spoke about. English and Anglophone intellectuals trying to deride him and all that. And then the third thing was you could attribute it to the fact that he came from, we have spoken Hindi and English, of course. Hindi belt would not have, expected a man from South who spoke a language which nobody understood, Kannada or Hindi or English for that matter. But he was not a Hindi speaker. So English and Hindi prejudice is one side. But there was a class prejudice which we have spoken about I told you about how the socialites looked at him, how the Delhi cocktail circuit looked at him. The other factor is the caste factor. See, Deve Gowda, you should realize, came from the bottom of the Varna hierarchy. Deve Gowda was a Shudra. Deve Gowda was the first Prime Minister of India who was an OBC. See, there was Charan Singh before him who never faced the parliament. So he never sort of, got to do anything. But, the Jats are also, it's a very confusing thing about Jats, where they sort of are placed in the Varna hierarchy. But Deve Gowda was clearly a Shudra. And there was an upper caste prejudice against the man. And that was not just in Delhi. You see that all through, even in Karnataka. So there is that myopia of caste that operates against Deve Gowda. There is English and Anglophone elite who dismiss him without really understanding what he's trying to do and what he's trying to say, and what his past is, and what his legislative work is or parliamentary work is. And there is, of course, the class factor. So these are some of the things that India, although it is democratic, although we give ourselves a constitution which tries to treat everybody as a equal citizen, and when India got independence, most people were illiterate, but they made the most wisest of choices through the ballot box. So India has been a country like that, but there is a small group of people who control opinion and power, who seem to have not endorsed Deve Gowda. So that could be the reason why he was not appreciated and he was not looked at very closely, although there was great affection for him in the villages of Uttar Pradesh, in the villages of Punjab, in the Northeast. He was almost worshipped. He was looked up. He was really admired in places like Bangladesh. So there was a lot of things happening which was not captured by the English newspapers in Delhi, which tried to say or portray him as a sleepy prime minister. And the sleeping thing, Mr. TSR Subramaniam, who was his cabinet secretary, clarifies on that. Mr. Chidambaram clarifies on that in the book. Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, who was his finance secretary, clarifies on that. See, Mr. Deve Gowda may have been tired once or twice. There is no doubt about that. But the sleeping thing is something that was completely distorted because Mr. Devegowda had a problem with his eyes. He could not look into the light. And he did. See, this is a simple communication. Somebody could have said that the Prime Minister can't take light into his eyes.
Hmm.
Nobody went out and said that. That is one. And so Mr. Chidambaram and Mr. Montek, Singh Haluwalia, and others clarify in the book that in cabinet meetings, that was his style. He would put his head down, but he would listen to everything so attentively that he would not let anything pass without proper scrutiny. So Mr. T.S.R. Subramaniam also writes in his book, in his
Hmm.
memoirs, that that is something that was completely unfair to Mr. Devegowda. So, I mean, on a lighter side, when I confronted Mr. Devegowda on this somnolence of
Hmm.
his, and why, I mean, he never clarified or never spoke about it or never sort of tried to correct the picture, he sort of, cracked a joke, or he sort of, made it light. He did not address the question, but he said, but Mr. Nehru also slept on the chair. So I was wondering what this man was trying to say. And I asked him, sir, why do you say this? How do you know that Mr. Nehru also sort of dozed off?
Hmm.
So he said, haven't you read Morarji Desai's autobiography? It's there in the second volume where he says this American foreign secretary comes to India,
Hmm.
and he goes to meet Mr. Nehru, and Nehru falls asleep, and he's so furious that his next stop is Islamabad. He goes there and sells very, very expensive military equipment to Pakistan, and that creates a certain kind of disadvantage to India over the long run. So Mr.
Hmm.
Devegowda jokingly said, see, Mr. Nehru's dozing off had a problem for India, created a kind of problem for India, but my dozing off did not harm India, don't worry. Even to this day, I don't think he looks at it as a very serious thing. He says, people who voted for me for 70 years don't worry about these things. So I serve the
Hmm.
people of India. I serve the poor of India. So the rhetoric and the kind of narrative that he constructs for himself is very, very different from the kind of narrative and the image that you try to pursue of the man. So that's what I try to argue in the book.
Okay. Would you say it's because of this, such a big change in time that you're seeing this? Because even now, currently the prime minister in office also says the same things. He comes from a humble background, and he identifies more with the poor. But that's something that he has crafted in a way that it works for him in terms of voters or media management. But that was not the case with Deve Gowda. Even if that was the truth about his own life, he never really utilized it to further his political career. Would you say that he has any regrets about that, seeing how things are panning out now?
That's a very good question, Pratibha. See, I don't think he has regrets about anything. I mean, he may sort of sulk once in a while saying that, oh, people did not understand me. But I don't think there are any regrets. He's always looking forward to the next fight. Like he said after my book was published, he said, I'm going to fight the 2023 elections or 2024 elections, parliamentary elections.
Mhm.
He'll be 92 by then. I don't know how he'll fight it. But then I think he was sufficiently charged to say that. You're absolutely right when you say Modi comes from similar backgrounds. Let's be fair to Prime Minister Modi. He
Mm.
came from a very, very humble background. And Mr. Manmohan Singh, too, came from a very, very
Mm.
poor background. And both of them, life was an ordeal for both of them, right? And like it was for Mr. Devegowda. But in the case of Mr. Devegowda, the difference between Mr. Devegowda and Manmohan Singh and Mr. Narendra Modi is Mr. Devegowda was completely self-made. There was no, opportunity for Mr. Devegowda to sort of, get any kind of patronage or pell for pedigree. There is nothing of that sort. He had to fight popular elections. He had to go amidst the people, be humiliated, be sort of dismissed, be loved. There was a kind of emotional transaction that was constantly happening between him and the people for 70 years. So he finally ends up being the patriarch of the Kaveri Basin, and all that is history. But with the case of Mr. Modi, see, Modi had an infrastructure which Mr. Devegowda never had, which is the Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh. Mr.
Mm.
Devegowda was never propelled by any movement, although he was part of the Jayaprakash Narayan's emergency and Sampurna Kranti and all that. He was never propelled by the Janata Party or the emergency or whatever. No movement, social movement propelled him. If you look at neighboring Tamil Nadu, there was the Dravidian movement, which propelled a Anna Dorai or a Karunanidhi or a M.G. Ramachandran or a Jayalalitha. So they were part of a bigger movement. Mr. Devegowda was a lone individual. He was fighting it on his own. He was, fighting his battles in complete isolation, all alone. But in the case of Modi, there was this huge infrastructure of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. So he was propelled by that. And Mr. Modi had never contested a popular election until he became the chief minister of Gujarat. So all his popular politics or popular, getting into the popular game of elections happened only after he became, the chief minister of Gujarat. And by then, Devegowda had spent 40 years in politics. See, 2002, 2001-2 is when Modi becomes the chief minister of Gujarat. And by then, Devegowda has stepped down as prime minister. He's already spent 40 years in politics and he has never entered through the back channel. Of course, he became the Rajya Sabha member when he had to resign his Ramnagaram seat in 1996 to be sworn in as prime minister. But he has always sort of gone through the popular route, the Lok Sabha route or the Legislative Assembly route. In the case of Mr. Manmohan Singh, the only election that he contested, he lost in Delhi. And he was a technocrat. He was never pretentious. He never said, I am a popular politician, I'm a mass leader. So he was a technocrat. He was nominated by somebody to be the prime minister of this country. And he had the finest of education in Oxford and Cambridge. So that was his cultural capital. He had acquired social and cultural and educational capital as he went along. But none of that is true about Mr. Devegowda. He did not have the RSS. He did not have Oxford and Cambridge degrees. He was modestly educated. He came from a modest background. His father was unlettered. His mother was unlettered. And they had 4 ragged acres on which some 10 people were dependent. So that was the kind of situation that he was in. And he makes it on his own, does not give up, does not regret. So does not sort of, give up at any stage. He's defeated many times. Every 10 years, I write in my book, every 10 years, his obituary is written, his political obituary is written. They say he's over. 89, 78, 89, 99. Devegowda is said to be over. 2009. So every 10 years, you've seen people write reams and reams about the end of Devegowda and he bounces back. So there is something else in the man besides the belief in his own destiny and his astrologers that we read about in the book. There is something else, some energy and some kind of enthusiasm and some kind of stellar, it's a stellar democratic engagement, which you don't see in either Modi or Manmohan Singh. Manmohan Singh could not have done it because he was not a mass leader. And Mr. Modi's democratic engagement is less said the better.
Right. And even if he did not have the backing of a Sangh like RSS, he still rose to political heights in India. And even now, people across the country identify with him, especially in Karnataka, farmers across the state identify with him more than any other political leader. But when you spoke of his political career, in his speech, as he had said that I will rise like a phoenix. Is that a hope that he still has? Critics have mentioned your book as a phoenix, that he rises after so many years in politics, and now people read more and more about him, know about what he has done in his political career. Do you see him having that kind of a hope even now, that yes, there will be a day when I will be in power?
Pratibha, I'm not very sure he has enough time to actually get back to an executive chair. I don't think he's 89, 88, 89 now. And I don't see that opportunity. Let's be pragmatic about it. So I don't see this real Phoenix movement happening where when, 97, when he said in Parliament in the middle of the night that I am going to sort of, come back, I'm going to rise from the ashes like the Phoenix. I don't think that is pragmatic or practical. I don't think that's going to happen. That's my feeling. You never know. You can never say that something is not going to happen. So that I'm not very sure. But then I'm extremely flattered when people say that this biography that you've written may actually be his Phoenix moment. So that's I'm really flattered when people say that, because here there is a comprehensive, exhaustive assessment of the man, which had not happened to this day. There are, as I told you right at the beginning, there are a lot of critical things that I point out. There are a lot of good things that I point out. And you kept on saying all through your this interview that he's a farmer's leader. But I demonstrate in this book that Mr. Deve Gowda was not just a farmer's leader. The manner in which he picked a Chidambaram to be his finance minister was a decision. It was his decision. It was not the decision of Mr. Chidambaram's party, which was Tamil Manila Congress those days. And it was not the decision of the left, which was supporting Mr. Deve Gowda, because I don't think they would have agreed to Mr. Chidambaram. Mr. Deve Gowda himself was in a dilemma, whether it should be Mursoli Maran, who he thought was an extremely dignified man, or Mr. Chidambaram. But then he jostles with his idea, and then he comes to a conclusion on his own and saying that there should be continuity with what Prime Minister Narasimha Rao has done, liberalizing the economy, and his own government, which is, is a coalition of 13 parties. And he decides that there has to be continuity and he cannot jerk the economy suddenly or jolt the economy. So he decides that Chidambaram should be his finance minister. And you see in the book, contrary to perception, Mr. Chidambaram is very conservative with a lot of ideas. It's Mr. Deve Gowda who is pushing and he's saying, no, we'll do this. This will work. And Mr. Chidambaram, trying to be a little more cautious. For example, the Delhi Metro. See, Delhi people should be totally indebted to Mr. Deve Gowda, because after the project had languished for a decade, it is Mr. Deve Gowda who gives it financial closure, much against the wishes of his finance minister and many of his cabinet members. He says no. And he gives a solid argument. I quote NP Singh, who was then the urban infrastructure secretary, and how this man builds the argument in the cabinet. And Mr. Deve Gowda was an engineer by training. So he knew not just irrigation and dams and agriculture and fertilizers, he also knew about urban planning. And when it comes to urban planning, because a lot of us live in Bangalore and what is called the Silicon Valley of India and all that, nobody acknowledges the fact that it was Mr. Deve Gowda who sort of created some basic infrastructure for the city to host information technology companies. It could be tax holidays. Telecommunication as a sector was, completely opened up under Mr. Deve Gowda in the 97 budget. How many people will tell you that? So Mr. Deve Gowda was not just a farmer's leader. Mr. Deve Gowda was an extraordinarily good, urban planner as well. And, he speaks about his 73 visit to Seoul and South Korea, where he looks at, group housing and, all that, and how he comes back with ideas. And this was a man who spent his own money going around the world to just make notes on big projects, infrastructure projects, studying terracotta dams. All of that comes in the book. So this man was extraordinary in the way he trained himself to be what he became finally. So he was not, when the left parties, Mr. Jyoti Basu or Harkishan Singh Surjit, when they made him the prime minister or nominated him or pushed him to become the prime minister of this country, I think they perfectly well knew what they were doing. And that comes out in the oral history archives of Mr. Jyoti Basu. And Mr. Jyoti Basu has observed Mr. Deve Gowda from the 1970s. He knows he's a class administrator. And he has met him just before, when he has become chief minister. They've had dinner together. And he's constantly asking Mr. Deve Gowda how he did certain things and how he's managing a certain problem. And so he goes back very impressed. And at that point, there is nothing in the horizon that he'll become the Prime Minister of India. So Mr. Jyoti Basu or Harkishan Singh Surjit, who were stalwart leaders and who were not people who wanted a puppet there in the Prime Minister's chair, they were tall leaders, and tall intellectuals as well. And they knew why they were making Deve Gowda the Prime Minister of this country. So all this kind of speculation and kind of dismissal that, oh, Deve Gowda just kept the chair warm for some time, is an obnoxious argument.
Okay, so for the achievements that you have mentioned as well, despite that, the truth is, even to this day, many people identify him as a farmer leader, despite all of the achievements that he has had. after the exhaustive book that you've written, what do you think he will always be remembered for in his political career? And is that something that makes him happy, or he would want people to know of the myriad works that he has put in?
Yeah, this farmers thing, yes, that will be his major legacy, because the kind of irrigation projects that he initiated across India through the consolidated fund that he created and all that, and the kind of work that he has done in the Krishna and Kaveri basin, more in the Krishna basin rather than the Kaveri basin, and the Narmada. I also speak of him as a man, as a prime minister, the only prime minister who's handled so many rivers in India, right? So that will of course be his legacy. Irrigation and agriculture will be his legacy. But now the new dimension that will get added to his personality through this book is that he was also a very fine manager of money. The personal income tax levels were dropped because of Mr. Deve Gowda, and he's completely, it is the 96-97 budget. So he's completely aware of what he's doing there. So his understanding of budget making, or his understanding of urban planning, or his forward vision. There's this abiding thing that he wanted to do something good for the country. So the manner in which he brought Northeast into the mainstream of Indian development thinking, which there's an entire chapter which is called On the Banks of the Brahmaputra, how he goes about whatever you see today happening, or the money that has been kept aside for the Northeast, all started with Mr. Deve Gowda. You look at Mr. Farooq Abdullah became extremely emotional in the Delhi launch of the book, and he said, "I will be eternally grateful till my last breath. I'll be grateful to you, Mr. Gowda." So he sort of sobbed, and that is because Mr. Deve Gowda reinitiated democratic engagement in Kashmir. He sort of he conducted the assembly elections extremely successfully, despite a lot of warnings and a lot of problems. And Mr. Farooq Abdullah returns to state politics as a result of that. So Mr. Deve Gowda will now be seen not just as a irrigation expert, agricultural expert, urban planner, and all that, but also some kind of a statesman. Because what he did with Bangladesh and Kashmir and Northeast is something that no Indian prime minister had ever thought. No prime minister had gone to Kashmir for 6 years. He goes 4 times in 11 months. No prime minister of India had gone and stayed in the Northeast, not even a half a day. Mr. Deve Gowda goes and stays there for 6 days. Bangladesh, the Faraka Treaty, that was a problem that languished for decades. Mr. Gowda sorts it out in 4 days, and he makes a back of the envelope calculation and convinces a Jyoti Basu, convinces everybody, convinces Sheikh Hasina. And that treaty, if you see what I've written about that treaty in the book, I have got Bangladeshi people to speak about it. How it benefited them. They say they have only one complaint against Mr. Deve Gowda. They say that he did such a fantastic treaty, but he restricted it only for 30 years. And now the treaty is expiring in 2029, and they don't know what the future of it will be. So that is Deve. So a lot of things come out. So as Mr. Nariman said in the launch, that Mr. Deve Gowda will be now remembered as a statesman.
Absolutely, a statesman and a visionary that he is. And, a look at your book will remind people of all of the achievements he has had, and look a little further from what he is known as always. Thank you so much, Mr. Sugata Srinivas Raju, for joining us, and congratulations on your book again.
Thank you, Pratibha. Pleasure.